Okay, back on LinkedIn with my buddy Anish. Now, what a lot of people don't know, Anish, we were just talking about this, is where we first met. I love telling this story
Yep.
because I was a federal agent in Los Angeles. You were, we'll get there, we'll get to where you were.
Yep.
But we were at an ATAP conference, and I'm going to mark ATAP below so you can do the research on it if you all want to. But we were at the ATAP conference, a yearly conference, and I was with my partner from NCIS. We were both on the Joint Terrorism Task Force. We sat down in the session next to a guy who had a cell phone case that was R2D2. And I sit down and I'm like, this guy think he's like the head of security for Lucasfilm or something. And then your phone rang and it was R2D2. And you said, oh, sorry, I got to take this. Boss is calling. I'm like, oh yeah, like George is calling you. And you're like, yeah, George is calling me. It probably wasn't George, but the funny thing is that was my introduction into the private sector, and I was legitimately, being a big Star Wars nerd for a long, long time, I was legitimately sitting next to somebody who worked for Lucasfilm and had no concept for what that was in, I guess, it was 2011, 2012. I eventually transitioned in the private sector, and one of the people that I consider to be my mentor into the private sector is you. And you're one of the people I called when I got the call from NVIDIA. And we've had a number of conversations over the years about the private sector. And even when I was in government, we were talking about these things. And I kind of want to explore your process, your roadmap, because you've worked in a lot of different areas since transitioning from law enforcement, worked in retail, worked in museums. Now you're working for an entertainment company, and that does a lot more than just entertainment, by the way. I mean, you have a working fire department that you're responsible for, and we'll get to that. I want to get into that,
Right.
but tell us a little bit about your transition from law enforcement to your first kind of role. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, so I got hired on to Pacifica PD, which is just south of San Francisco here on the coast. I got hired there when I was 19 years old, and I did a little work in dispatch. That was probably the first year or so I was in dispatch, and then I transitioned to be a patrol officer. Went through the academy via Pacifica and all that, and spent about 12 years there until I got hurt. And so here I am at 31. My life is not over, but my career is over at this point, and had to retire out. And everybody I talked to at the time, which was other cops essentially, said, well, security is the easy transition, right? So I followed that route. I went into loss prevention as a mid-level manager, worked for Sony Development for a while. We built Metreon downtown San Francisco. Wound up running that program by the time I left it about 3 years in. And I went to the Asian Art Museum here in San Francisco as well. Closed that facility, moved that full collection down to the Civic Center, and then reopened as an operating museum back in 2002 to 2004. And then from there, I wound up where I am today in a way. I wound up with Lucasfilm and Industrial Light and Magic, and that was right about the time we met. Actually, was when that transition happened for me. So yeah, it was weird. I think that when we come out of law enforcement, or at least my colleagues, my previous colleagues and I at the time, and we're talking late 90s when that all happened, there was only one path for us, we thought, and that was security. Either executive protection, loss prevention, or standing guard at some place. And there wasn't really a lot of opportunity there for people like me who were patrol officers. When you get higher in the chain, there's probably different options, but not where I was. So through a series of very good luck, very good mentors I had along the way, and opportunities that I was able to snag as they presented themselves, I find myself in a really wonderful position today and a job that I love.
You mentioned mentors, and we've talked before on our posts here that is so important to have at least one, but I like many. Was it when you are looking for a mentor? What were you looking for? Was it about position? Was it about who they had previously been, maybe from law enforcement, military? How do you find a mentor?
Yeah, I think that it's really, really important to find somebody that matches up, that's got the experience, that you can speak the same language with right off the bat. My mentor, and if it's okay, I'll mention him by name here. His name is Mark White. He was a 20-year, a loss prevention guy out of Mervyn's and some other retail outlets way back when. He was my first boss out of law enforcement, and I can't say enough about how much he did for my career. Just to introduce me how to budget. We didn't budget as patrol officers, right? And he really took me under his wing. He was a reserve officer up in Martinez, so he knew law enforcement, and we were able to connect immediately. And I learned in the 1 year with him, I learned probably 6 years worth of information that then launched me into the next positions. And it worked for him. I don't know where I'd be today, to be honest.
Well, and that's I love the transitions that you have, because I like people who have eclectic experiences. Retail compared to museum or kind of more public safety. You've got museum goers, and then you've got all the very expensive museum pieces, right?
Yep.
Huge transition.
Yep.
What did you have to do mentally to prepare yourself, or even once you did transition, what was your experience there? It was pretty different.
Well, I think that, as you and I have talked about many times, I think that what we focus on now, different from what we focused on before as we were just coming out of our field, is the transferable skills you bring, not necessarily what you did as a title and what you did as a duty, but what that meant as the underlying skill that you brought to the new thing. So the one thing that I did immediately about coming out of law enforcement was join an association, a security association, so I could start building my network. Okay. And then there was another association associated specifically with cultural property protection that as soon as I got the job, I jumped into that association just to, again, build the network within the industry that I was going to be a part of at that point. And the contacts that you make, the people that you talk to, it makes a difference. It really does, because you can guide your own education in a way to that industry that you can't find in a book, you can't find in a webinar. It really is gravitating towards those people who are willing to give you some time, that I think made all the transitions, every one of them that I've done, successful in that way.
That's interesting. We talk a lot about certifications and going to get an MBA or advanced certificates. I think those are you can't hold a candle to experience, though, and and having a conversation to be very tactical. So I love that that there is a cultural arts security association. That's great. I didn't know that. So we talk a lot about as-is and ATAP and things like that, because
Sure.
those are kind of the mainstream ones. So definitely people should be looking for those opportunities. So then you made a transition into, and we just had this conversation, it's kind of cool. You transitioned not necessarily to Lucasfilm, you transitioned to ILM first.
I
And
did.
a lot of people don't know Industrial Light and Magic was George Lucas's prop and special effects company, and you started there. But how did that work? Why there and then Lucasfilm? Tell about that story too.
Well, organically, Lucasfilm at the time was a number of companies tied together through corporate structure. Industrial Light and Magic was part of an organization called Lucas Digital, which included Skywalker Sound, or Sky Sound. And so what I did was I was hired into Industrial Light and Magic as the security manager for ILM specifically for the first year that I was there. The plan had been, in my discussions with the folks that I wound up working with, that we were opening a new campus in San Francisco. That was going to be the consolidated headquarters for the companies. And I would transition into a larger corporate security role if I were successful with Industrial Light and Magic, and assimilating to that culture and really understanding the broader Lucasfilm culture as well. And it's hard in a very creative organization like that one is. Security is maybe not the first thought by a lot of those folks. But being able to be successful, being able to get buy-in and really serve the company, I think was what led to where I am today.
Did you, when you talk about culture, we talk about getting buy-in from the top. And we know who the top of that organization is, very iconic director and producer and writer. Not as great a writer, but we won't go into that. But still love him for everything he's done. So, did you get a chance to talk with him? Did you get a chance to kind of understand his vision? Did he have a vision even for your position early on?
Yeah, no. The answer is no. George and I never had direct contact in those early days at all. I was working through proxy, essentially, of people that represented him in the companies, and it was a corporate structure that we operated within, and he had people in place to do all that. I think that so I'll back up a second. The R2D2 phone call was not from George. So let's just,
You
sorry.
actually know. You actually remember that. Okay.
I do. But no, that was not. That was somebody else. But anyway, the
In
point
my
is
mind, it was George.
yeah, well, okay, let's just keep it that way then. How about that?
Or maybe, I don't know.
But so working through the culture of the company, which is very much George. I mean, that everything comes from the top, as you said. And what filters down is that, the company was very family oriented. The company was very focused on providing for the employees, providing for an atmosphere that enhanced creativity. There was a whole R&D part of the company that was developing this groundbreaking software that ILM used for special effects and all that for movies. The sound operations at Sky Sound are top notch, first, best in class, everything. But every one of them had this family culture. We were all first name basis, all the way up to George. I mean, everybody talked first name, didn't matter. It made the organization feel much flatter than it was, in a sense, and we didn't have any barriers on who we could talk to get our jobs done. So I worked directly for the presidents of various divisions of the company down to colleagues and peers for various situations, and I would just adjust, but there was no restriction as to who I could talk to about what, in other words.
Yeah, interesting. Most or a lot of security leaders don't have that you're kind of running up and down the chain kind of visibility. And what do you think allowed you to be successful there, where you're talking with people at all different levels?
Yep. I think, first of all, they didn't really have a structured program when I was hired. So I got to build that program from the ground up, which is what I had done at the Asian Art Museum and what I had done at Metreon as well. So as part of the appeal of me coming into that job was being able to build something that wasn't there before. There was a security program in the sense of a security supervisor. There were people who walked around and locked doors and did all that and were part of the ILM culture. But broadly, there was no corporate security vision or program. And that is what I got to build. So I had successes very early on in getting collaboration across these divisions of the company. I made great connections with the leaders of the various companies and proved to them that I could provide value immediately. And I wasn't the guy coming in to say no to everything and shut down things, right? So it was really to be a business enabler and really understand what that meant,
Right. And I like the term business enabler. That's great because business first, right? We have to, and empower people to make good decisions so that we can not impact the bottom line in a negative way, especially as security professionals. Yep. So now we have this unique kind of situation where you were at ILM, then you were at now Lucasfilm, and Lucasfilm moved. They physically moved to a new location. Let's talk about that location. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because it's kind of on a unique piece of property in the United States.
It is.
And it's a great building, by the way. It's beautiful. But it had a lot of kind of unique challenges. Let's drill in there a little bit.
It did, yeah. So we're in the Presidio of San Francisco. It's a federal enclave within the city. It's run privately by the Presidio Trust, which is a board that is appointed by the president to safeguard and shepherd this beautiful piece of property in the northeast corner of San Francisco, right at the end of the Golden Gate Bridge. We have 24 acres there that we have built buildings on. We built two of the buildings are built in the main post style, which is red brick and the roof tile, and then the other two are the more modern white-sided red roof type. So we blend into the Presidio based on the architecture, et cetera, and that was very conscious by George in the design of that place. But so our interactions are not with San Francisco Police Department; they're with the U.S. Park Police. We are part of the property there is Golden Gate National Recreation Area, and the rest is federal property. So there are some jurisdictional interesting things that occur there. But again, just building the relationships with the federal police has been wonderful for us, and it's really served us well to be where we are. And having of those 24 acres, having 16 of them open to the public as public access with a pond and a stream running down from the top and all that. It's very idyllic in the middle of San Francisco. Well, not in the middle, but in the corner of San Francisco. We get a lot of people who come in and just sit with their families and have picnics and things like that. So we have a lot of public access space as well as these corporate buildings there.
Which, we don't have to go into the specifics of what you're doing security-wise, but that does add a challenge to your physical security when you have doors that may not close all the way because of air pressure or something like that. Mm-hmm. You can't necessarily put cameras on the outside of buildings that, would look would look horrible to the architecture. Mm-hmm. And like you said, you've got the general public walking around, and you have employees kind of coming and going as well. So adds an additional layer of challenge, right?
I'll tell you the most interesting thing that we had to do there initially was educate the employees that they should not have their monitors facing the windows. So people walking by can see exactly what they're working on, and and all that. So it was interesting because it's the first foray Lucasfilm or any of the companies had made into a public area. We were always behind fences and gates and and guardhouses and all that other stuff. I mean, Lucasfilm was not accessible to the public at all until we moved to the Presidio.
A great point. You go to Burbank or you go to Los Angeles to the studios down there, and they have 10-foot tall fencing. A studio that is also in the Bay Area that is not Lucasfilm also has a big fence, and we won't say who it is. But they're not accessible because of those privacy concerns.
For sure.
But now the interesting thing I think with your job is that you also have a very rural area in a part of Northern California that you're responsible for. Were you always responsible for Skywalker Ranch, or is that something that's new?
So that was added in as the role grew with the company. Our fire chief up there, who you've met, Mark Horick, he really ran security and still is the face of security for the ranches. He's part of the overall security structure, which includes the fire department. But Mark has been the face of security for Skywalker Ranch since long before I got there, and probably long after I'm gone. He's a fixture and just a wonderful security manager. He really is embedded in what we do as a company, and I take a lot of cues from him when it comes to dealing with situations that we have within the company.
Yeah, definitely. There aren't too many outside of the film industry, too many security leaders that also have fire responsibility or fire life safety responsibility. And I think that's a unique aspect of your job, is that you have to kind of know a little bit about medical response, wildland firefighting, because you're in the hills of Northern California. How did you prepare for that? Was it just you got a great chief in Mark, and you were kind of like, hey, I'll let you do what you do, and you tell me what resources you need, or did you have to learn kind of what their budget looks like, how they stay trained and certified and all those things?
Yeah, I mean, a little of both and more of the first than the second. I mean, Mark has done this for many years, and he knows what he needs. I'm not coming in to teach him anything at all, right? But what I can do for Mark is I can smooth the road on the corporate side. The people who are coming in with watching the numbers and making the policy that could impact us. So that's where I think I serve Mark better than anything else, is really being kind of a buffer, I think, between the folks who don't really understand what the job is, and then I can translate that. I've got enough knowledge to make me dangerous on the fire side, which is why I count on Mark to keep me out of trouble. But no,
put wet stuff on red stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I hear. You guys have all told me that, but I'm a cop, not a firefighter, and
That's right. There's a difference, a big difference.
Yeah, there is, but he has a fabulous staff. The captains are all top notch. Mark himself has, again, like I said, he's been in this role for a long time, and he's done a lot of outside education in the risk management world to complement what he does on the fire science side of things. So, again, nothing I can teach him walking into this. I can just make his job easier.
Yeah. Yeah. The signs of a good leader, let your people do what they do best, right?
Yep.
So, what kind of recommendations do you have as people are transitioning from law enforcement to the private sector? What do you recommend that they do? You've had a great career doing this for a very long time. Any recommendations?
Yeah, it's interesting. So Tuesday, I had a conversation with a former Marine who was coming in to look to step into a security management role that's somewhat associated with us. And the one thing that we talked about in there was all his great experience. And I mean, God bless all the service people out there. Thank you for your service, much appreciated. He's done some high speed operator stuff, right?
Yeah.
But again, my recommendation was go back to what we had said in the very beginning, and that is understand the culture, understand the transferable skills. Don't tell me you're a firearms instructor because that's not anything in my culture that matters. Tell me you know how to train people.
That's right.
Because that matters, right? And I think that's my first recommendation always with colleagues is understand the culture of the place you're going. If you're going into an FBI shop, understand what the FBI thinks. Right? If you're coming into an organic artistic shop, don't come in the same way. I mean, and that it really is. I mean, that sets the tone. And I think that is where people make their initial mistake. Maybe it's overcomable in a way, obviously, but I think that not understanding what you're getting into or who you're talking to sometimes can be problematic.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll pause there. I know we've gone maybe a little bit longer than most, but there's so much information that I wanted to pull out here. It's great to hear our continued kind of monologue, which is culture matters.
Yep.
Tone at the top matters, and this is where your network comes in because a lot of people you can't Google like the culture of Skywalker Ranch or the culture of Lucasfilm. You might be able to do it for bigger entities like Disney, but there isn't a lot of data out there. And so what I've always preached is that's where your network comes in. You've got to find people that you can connect with and that can share their experiences and prepare you for the interview process or onboarding or whatever it may be. Thank you very much for being with us, talking with us, and sharing your experiences. This has been tremendous. What I'll tell to the people who are watching this, please share this with your partners. No one goes it alone. This isn't something that you just make a decision like tomorrow I'm going to go be the head of security for XYZ company. It's a journey, and there are a bunch of steps that you're going to take along the way. But nobody has to do this on their own, and I know you echo that, and appreciate your time. But please, if you're watching, like this, comment, tell us what you think, tell us what your challenges are, and share this with your friends and your partners. And we're gonna get through this together. So thanks, Anish.
Very well said, Scott. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
You got it, buddy.